Hey all, Choiboy here. Welcome to another video. Finally, I got to record this one. I've been planning to put this one out in September, but a lot of things happened since then. You know, a lot of things in the household, personally as well. So I was mentally and physically quite occupied, so I didn't really have much of a time to record it or the mindset to. But finally, everything is settling down, so I finally got to, get into this video. Let's get straight into it. Before we get into it, I need to do a disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt because I'm not a professional. I'm an amateur, just like you guys that might be doing these kind of personal finance things. It's a passion of mine and I'm just sharing my opinions with you. But please do your own research before you act on any of the content I talk about. This includes stocks, crypto, even this card thing, credit card and buy now, pay later. Just be aware and take it with a grain of salt. Getting straight into it, credit card and BNPL. I needed to make this video a bit earlier than Boxing Day and Black Friday, but it is what it is. I finally got to it at least, and it is NZ edition because it is slightly different on how New Zealand treats credit cards compared to how US treats credit cards. And I think a lot more people who watch a lot of YouTube and personal finance YouTubers in the US, they would be more exposed to the US system, which doesn't really correlate too much in New Zealand. There are common things, but there are differences as well, and that's what I'm going to kind of go through, how it would be treated like in New Zealand. Going to the next one. What is credit? You need to understand what credit is. A credit is a trust that allows a party, normally a bank, to lend money to the borrower for them to pay back at a later date. Pretty much the bank is like, okay, we're going to give you a $10,000 kind of limit, however much you want out of it, as long as you pay it back in the future. Because that is the case, credit limit becomes a huge thing, because how much you can raise your credit limit per month normally depends on your income. The more income you have, the more ability you have to pay back the credit in full in the next due date. For that reason, they'll always assess your credit limit based on how much you make. I don't know if assets make a big play in it, I'm not entirely sure, but income is pretty much 100%. Higher the income, higher the credit limit you can put up, but I'll talk about why you shouldn't always increase your credit limit to the maximum amount you can, because it just, there's a bit of a mindset thing and it doesn't create good habits if you don't control it properly. So you need to pay it back in full at the end of each month period, generally speaking, or you can pay back just the minimum payment, which is normally very, very, very small compared to what your full payment would be. I highly do not recommend anyone to only pay the minimum for very good reasons. It creates a very bad habit for you to only pay the minimum, and it kind of affects your spending habits, which I'll talk about later as well. Credit debt is something that people struggle with. Too many people have unnecessary credit card debt. This includes things like impulse purchases and using a credit card in the means of spending more than what you make. That is not very good. First of all, I think banks and lenders should be aware that they should not be giving a limit higher than their monthly income. But if that's not the case, and if people have no control over their spending, then they start to use credit cards like free money. And because they can only pay the minimum payment, which is very small compared to the full payment you have to pay per month, just to keep it rolling, you'll incur interest rates and you'll be raking up bad spending habits. It's not good, just not good. Don't even get into credit card debt if possible. If you are really, really struggling and if you need a credit card debt to kind of live your life, only buying the things necessary, then by all means, everyone's in different phases. But for people who do not need credit card, that are just spending credit cards to go shopping at Gucci, millennials and Gen Zs nowadays, don't do that. It's the dumbest thing you can do. And especially nowadays where we're talking about recessions and whatnot, this is the time to be saving money to buy cheaper and discounted assets, not liabilities and not Gucci bags or whatever. Sure, you can, but don't go crazy on them. The main focus should be saving money. I'm not going to go into too much detail there because it is about credit cards and buy now, pay later, but that is for another live stream or something. Having credit card debt will hinder your ability to maximize your credit score, but also affect your mortgage borrowing ability. When you are going in for a mortgage for your first home or whatever, they'll look at your spending habits and they'll look at your credit limits. If your credit limits are like really high and you max out on all of them, they might think you're a big spender, so they wouldn't like it. I don't exactly remember, but I think they took out $60,000 of what you can borrow from your mortgage every 10,000 credit limit you have. So if you have $20,000 credit limit in total across all your credit cards, then you won't be able to get that 120,000 on top of what you have already. So if your maximum loan was going to give you 800, you would only get 680 because you have a 20k credit limit. You know, that's how it really works. So it does hinder your ability to borrow money and also maximize credit score because it's a bit confusing, right? Because in the US, as you can see here, higher credit limits kind of correlate to higher credit scores. That's how they work. So if you can afford, if you have the ability to raise your credit limit, they think you're a really good credit guy, so they'll increase your credit score. So that means that US has a kind of pro credit card kind of culture, where New Zealand is kind of like an anti credit card culture. So there's a big difference there and how it affects you. In New Zealand, if you want a really good credit score which maximizes your ability to borrow, especially for a house or any other loans, you should not have credit cards. That might be a bit hard. Some people do benefit from credit cards, and I will be talking about that after as well. So if you really do need a credit card, keep the credit limit low and don't have more than 2 credit cards. I don't know why you need 2, but yeah, I have 2, but one I barely use and one I use a lot. So I'll talk about these as well pretty soon. And just for your information, this is my credit score, which is 771, which is decent for my age. And I think I checked this from Credit Simple. There's the link right there, creditsimple.co.nz. Check them out. You can find your credit score and all those kind of things and what might be hindering your credit score, and it'll kind of show you like a nice summary. So you can check that out. So going back to the front page, types of credit cards. Now you need to understand what kind of credit cards you have available for you to pick up. So there's rewards based or low interest rates. Those are like the main kind of differentiators, at least in New Zealand. So rewards kind of like benefits like flights, insurance, VIP lounge and stuff like that. Amex does really good benefits card. I think other banks, major banks in New Zealand also does pretty good benefit cards. Also cashback and points, which kind of goes into benefit as well. But yeah, under rewards, and Air Points credit card is a very popular one as well for people who travel a lot. So these are the 3 main kind of rewards cards, and low interest cards are like the ones that bear the least amount of interest for overdue credit balances, and some providers offer no interest rates, interest free for periods of time after you make a big purchase on your credit card. So you know, there's a lot of different ways you can use a credit card, but these are the kind of main types. Okay, and credit card example, so banks, ASB, ANZ, Westpac, BNZ, KeyBank, SBS, you know, all these kind of major banks do kind of offer basic credit cards. Some of them might be good, some of them might be pretty average. You know, you need to figure it out yourself and do the math yourself. Credit card specialists like American Express is kind of like more specific to credit cards, so it's something I use as well, and I use something that's discontinued right now, which is called the American Express Platinum Edge, which they do not do anymore. But yeah, so I have this until I cancel it. I don't think I'll cancel it because I make good benefits out of it. The annual fee is only like $200 or something, and I get a free complimentary return domestic flight every year. So that already covers the annual fee, plus I get a cashback. Well, I get a system where I can use my points, credit card points, to pay some of the transaction in my credit card. So I benefit so much from it. I pay all the bills in the house with this credit card, and I pay everything else that does not incur a surcharge when I use my Amex card, you know, when I do online shopping or something like that. So I benefit so much from this. So this is how you should be using a credit card, when you benefit a lot from what they give you. Well, if you're not getting back more than what you're paying for in the annual fees, then it does not make sense. So you got to do the math, but I'm not going to go into too much details there because there's too many cards and there's too much to go through. Before the Amex card, I used to just use this ASB Lite, which is a low interest credit card, which I don't use anymore, and it doesn't really give me any other benefits, so I tend not to use it at all. I might be, you know, I just have it just in case I need it in the future. Like, for example, if I don't have enough money in my debit, in my check account or something like that, because I forgot to change it or whatever, you know, those times I would use it. But it's more of like an emergency card rather than like an everyday credit card is my Amex card right here. So yeah, there's a link to top credit cards in NZ. Money Hub did a little bit of a list, so go through their link to check that out as well. Okay, carrying on, how to use credit cards. In NZ, it's best if you don't have a credit card, if you don't need it, because borrowing money is a complex thing which people kind of overlook. So best thing is not to have a credit card, especially if you have spending habit issues or if you're going for a mortgage. If you need your credit card, just lower the credit limits as much as possible you can. I tend to keep mine, I used to keep mine like in the $15,000 kind of credit limit total, but I reduced that below 10,000 the recent months, because I'm starting to look for a property where now I'm starting to be a bit more reasonable with my credit limits and, you know, how I spend my money, because I need to get a mortgage. So benefits has to be more than the annual fee. That's the second thing which I just mentioned. Make sure you are getting more than what you're paying for in the annual fees. These guys make a percentage of your purchases, whatever you use to buy with your Amex card. They make a percentage of it from the merchant, the stores. So yeah, just make sure you get enough benefits to cover the annual fee and more than that. And try to use it when there's not a surcharge on when you're using a credit card. Especially American Express is not widely like accepted, especially in smaller stores. I tend to use it when it doesn't incur a surcharge, because there's no real point of using a credit card if I am paying more than what I would pay on a debit card, right? I want to use my credit card when there is no fees, extra fees, and I reap the benefits of the credit card. So it's like a win-win kind of situation here. And lastly, do not use it like an overdraft. Please, with low interest and interest-free credit cards, do not be fooled, because, you know, sure, you might be getting what you want out of it, but you are mentally screwing yourself in terms of spending habits. Spending habit is so important that people overlook so much. It hurts me. I nearly went down the same path, but I did the math and I was like, okay, one day I was like, okay, that's not right. I need to, like, you know, I need to be aware of how I use a credit card. And, you know, ever since then, I've been a bit more reasonable. So please remember to not use it like an overdraft. Spend only what you can afford and how you would normally do. Just because you have a credit card does not mean you go out to buy impulse purchases. You do that when you have the money to yourself. Okay, carrying on. Is buy now, pay later worth it? Is it? No. Short answer is no, if you want to know the answer. Afterpay, Lay-by, Zip, Genoa Pay, these are all buy now, pay later. So you buy everything right now and you pay back the full payment over, you know, like few months or something like that. So you pay them back weekly or fortnightly, something like that. So there's a lot of things wrong with this. I think ethically speaking, I'm not a really big fan of buy now, pay later. I did use it once, but I was like, I don't really need this, and I don't know what benefits me. It will benefit people who cannot afford to buy things at that point in time because they don't have enough money. But the question you should be asking is, do you really need that? And if you don't, you should not be using buy now, pay later to fund it. You know, interest free catches a lot of people. They're like, okay, it's interest free, it's free, I don't need to pay more. I can just pay it in, you know, smaller installments. It doesn't matter. It's not really good for you spending habit wise and mindset wise. It also impacts your ability to borrow money from banks, such as mortgages. It works the same as credit cards. You are pretty much buying something in full without having to pay it in full at that point in time. You can pay it over the next couple of months. Works the same as credit cards, right? So obviously this does affect your credit score, and it does affect your ability to maximize your borrowing for when you look for a house. So that's definitely not worth it already, to be honest. And credit cards itself should be fine. If you have a credit card, I don't know why you need a buy now pay later as well. I've seen a lot of people use both. Just choose one, to be honest. Honestly, don't even go for buy now pay later. Find a good, decent credit card if you really need a credit card, and just stick to that. Do not even touch this, to be honest. Scheme to make you buy things you cannot afford right now. That's the whole thing, right? They're like, okay, you can afford it right now and you can pay it later. That's the whole mindset. It's not a healthy mindset, to be honest. Just don't. Just skip it. Skip it. So, outro. Conclusions, you know, points to take from this video: don't use credit cards unless you can control your spending, and make sure the benefits are higher than the annual fees. Keep your credit card as low as possible. It helps with the mortgages and borrowing money in the future. You know, don't even get started with buy now pay later, please. It's not really good for you. Maybe if you really need it, and if you don't have credit cards, and if you need to buy things and you cannot afford it right now, that's probably the only time I would say it's okay. But other than that, I don't really think it's a good idea. Finally, aim to increase your salary so you can naturally move away from relying on these services. Buy now, pay later services is kind of targeted towards low income classes, and credit cards kind of works in all three. But credit card limits, you can only increase it if your income is higher. So I guess credit cards are a bit more sensible, but yeah, buy now pay later, anyone can use it and stuff like that. I don't know if credit score, your existing credit score, affects your buy now pay later, but if it does, that makes sense. If it doesn't, then it's kind of a chaos, because yeah, it's not really good. So yeah, beware of buy now pay laters, beware of credit cards as well, and if you live without it, it's probably best you don't ever touch it at all. If you need it, please research into the credit cards you want, and just make sure you know what you're getting through, and make sure you have a clear budgeting kind of plan, and make sure you're not using these credit cards and buy now pay later systems to kind of buy more than what you can afford. So that's all for today. If you like today's video, give it a thumbs up, put a comment down below what you thought and any questions you might have. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and put the bell notification for my next live streams and updates, and I will see you in the next video. Don't know why I paused there, but anyways, Happy New Year, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye.